Hello everybody, welcome back to Norwich Talk for another video. In today's video we're going to chat about Emi Buendia and answer the question, how much do I think Emi Buendia is worth? Now, as ever, I'm very keen to know your thoughts in the comments down below. How much do you think Emi Buendia is worth? It's probably worth waiting to answer that question until after I've said my piece. Maybe that'll influence your opinion, maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree. We'll find out if you stick around to watch the video, that is of course. But yeah, in today's video we're going to be answering the question, how much do I think Emi Buendia is worth? Because today it was released that he did an article. I saw a tweet from Nick Mashiter. I'm not sure if he did the interview or not, but it's been doing the rounds on Twitter. An interview that Emi Buendia did about his future in Norwich City, etc. And the general idea of this video is to sort of weigh up the pros and cons of Emi Buendia and figure out a potential asking price or a specific valuation from myself of Emi Buendia, and then sort of gather whether sort of he's worth the risk and the gamble, because I think we can sort of all agree that Emi Buendia for any Premier League team or any sort of top flight team at the moment would be a bit of a gamble. And I think the main question you've got to ask yourself is, would it be worth that gamble? In the actual interview, he said that he's happy at Norwich City. He loves the city. He's happy to stay and fight for the shirt. The main thing that I took from the interview is that he said he's always going to fight for the shirt, which is always nice to read. But basically, if a silly offer comes in, he's off, which doesn't seem like anything new. I saw a couple of tweets that basically said it's nothing new to us, really, which I agree with. But at the same time, I think it's equally nice to read that he's happy at Norwich City and willing to fight for us, because there's always this question of attitude when it comes to Emi Buendia, isn't there? But you know, as far as we can read, he's happy to sort of fight for Norwich City, whether he's here after the summer window. I keep saying summer window and then remembering it's October, which is bizarre, but if he's still here after the summer window, he'll continue to fight for Norwich, and I think he would play an important part in getting us back into the Premier League. But yeah, we're going to start with the pros of Emi Buendia. I'm going to sort of list them off, and then we'll sort of go over them in a bit of a finer detail. I've got him down as one of sort of Norwich City's best dribblers that I've actually seen, which I think is that is such a certainty to me. I'm so certain on that. There's not many players like him. I think the sort of player that he was compared to initially was Wes Hoolahan. The ability he has with the ball at his feet, it's just ridiculous. Like, it's glued to his foot sometimes. He's so quick on the ball as well. Not that he's the quickest sprinter, but he's very, very quick on the ball, and the ball is always so close to his feet. He knows Teemu Pukki's movement incredibly well. A deadly partnership in the Championship, of course, for the 18-19 promotion campaign, and it was also fairly lethal for a little bit in the Premier League. He's got that ability to just know where Pukki is. We saw it on the opening day against Liverpool. We also saw it against Leicester. I think they were the two best examples. We saw it a few times where Pukki didn't finish, and maybe if he had finished, maybe we would have finished a little bit higher in the Premier League. But you know, that's all for last season's content. That's all over now, of course. But he knows Pukki's movement really well. He's created the 5th most chances in the Premier League for the 1920 season. I'm pretty sure of that anyway. That's a stat that sort of got tossed around quite a lot, and I blow hot and cold with it, in terms of this idea that it's just it's not an actual assist or a goal, but at the same time he's doing his job, essentially, is the way I look at it, and maybe the striker in front of him, whoever that is, Teemu Pukki, wasn't doing their job. But again, that is annoying 1920 conversation that isn't really sort of wanted. I don't really want to have that. I don't think anyone wants to have that anymore, but I still think it's an impressive stat. But again, I sort of blow hot and cold with it. I think we all do, really, at times, and the most interesting thing that I completely forgot is that he's created the most chance in a calendar month in Premier League history. Now, according to the tweet that I read, that is from 2003 to 2004 onwards, which is utterly ridiculous. And again, it's this whole idea of chance creation and how much you value that stat. For the sake of this video, I'm going to say it's valued quite highly, because I think it is a worthy pro of an individual. In terms of a team and sort of a collective team stats, maybe it's not so much, but for an individual valuation of a player, I think it's quite impressive. I think below him was Steven Gerrard in 2007 in December with 26. Buendia was on 29, so he's sort of up there with that calibre of player, which is just, again, ridiculous for a season that was fairly miserable as well. But they're the pros I've got down for him. I think the main one that I take from that is that he is one of Norwich City's best dribblers that I've seen in recent history as well, especially. He's just so good with the ball at his feet. I remember that clip. We'll ignore the fact he lost the ball at the end of it, but there's that clip of him against Stoke in the 18-19 season where he's just sort of pinging it around players for fun. And that is the Emi Buendia that we're going to want to see when I think he inevitably returns to the 11. because he's just really good at that. And one thing that I did fear after Wes Hoolahan declining, leaving, whatever, was that we would be unable to replace that type of player who just sort of brings others into the game, gets the ball forward, can dribble really well. But Emi Buendia seems to be that. He's also really selfless on the ball, which is utterly bizarre sometimes because he can be selfish. But in front of goal, he loves to get an assist, which arguably is going to be a con as well in terms of the idea that he doesn't shoot. But the fact that he just has this natural instinct to just cut the ball across. You look at Man City as a great example where he, I think it was Otamendi, gave the ball straight to him, and he could quite easily have shot and bagged himself a goal maybe, but he's naturally squared it to Timu Pukki, again knowing Pukki's movement really well. And I think that's just about it for his pros, because I don't really want to repeat myself. You can give loads of examples of different pros that I've given there and sort of go around in a really big circle, but I think it's important not to do that. So just to sum it up, he's one of the best dribblers we've seen for Norwich City, and now I've just repeated myself like I said I wasn't going to, and also he's got them really impressive chance creation stats in the Premier League, which I think Premier League teams will use as a reason to perhaps purchase or be interested in, at the very least, Emi Buendia. Now, if we look at his cons, this isn't new to anyone. A bit like what he said in the interview, this is sort of well known. His attitude on the pitch is questionable at times. You know, the arm swinging. Sometimes he focuses more on annoying the referee, and he's not got a great temper either. That's another one. I've also got that he didn't score enough in the Premier League, and also he's got the baggage of being part of the 1920 Premier League team. He played a massive role, made 36 appearances in that season, so he is a main part of that team that finished, the worst season of Norwich City's recent history at the very least. I'm never actually sure if it's the worst or not, but he was still an integral part of that team, and he's always going to carry that baggage until he moves. I said the same for Todd Cantwell. For as young as they are, for as little experience as they had, they're always going to have that over their heads, and it's just about mental resilience, of which, for what it's worth, I think both players are very mentally resilient to it. Having said that, I know nothing about them sort of personally, but I think they are. I think that's evident on the pitch as well. But the main one for me is the attitude. I remember, I always reference this interview because I think it's important to, but when Connor was here, he did an interview with Kieran Scott, didn't he? I don't know if you remember that. Make sure you go and check that out because it's still relevant now in terms of the transfer methods. And he said that signing Emi Buendia was a bit of a risk, and that's because of attitude. He's got that sort of Argentinian fire in his belly, that South American fire, whatever you want to call it, as well as the flair as well. But it's just the idea that when things don't really go his way, he gets a bit snappy, the arms start swinging. And naturally, for me personally, it really bothers me seeing that. And I remember you sort of started to see it in the 18-19 season a little bit towards the end. QPR were the team who sort of picked out his weakness perfectly in terms of actually getting him sent off in the 18-19 season. All you've got to do is just target him and wind him up. And for as much as the person fouling him should have had a yellow card, he didn't, and he got a rise out of Buendia. He got him sent off. And I think that sort of sums up maybe how teams should and could and usually do attempt to deal with Emi Buendia as well. The arm swinging is just annoying, but I think that's just sort of modern footballers, isn't it? You always get the arm swinging, but again, for me, it's a con because it's just rather irritating. And the idea of the fact that he's not got a great temper maybe suggests that he's not the most mentally strong player on the pitch, just to sort of caveat what I said earlier to balance the scale. And now another interesting one is that I don't think he scored enough last season, or I don't think he took enough shots. Perhaps maybe I should phrase it like that instead, because with a player like Emi Buendia, you think last season if he adds 7-8 goals to his already 7-8 assists or 9 assists, whatever he got, it's like you've then got yourself a £35 million, a £40 million man who teams are going to want to snap up. He can score, he can assist, he can do it all. He can create chances, of course. That's such an important thing for a player of his position to do, but he didn't. And there were times where, it's brilliant. You look at the Man City game, as I mentioned earlier, his instincts to cut the ball across, not to shoot, and that worked. But there are times where he had the ball in dangerous positions, and you just think, shoot. I think there was a couple of chances against Wolves where you think, just let fly. And if you miss, you miss. At the end of the day, we know Emi Buendia can score. We know he can actually shoot. We saw it against Watford. It's frustrating. You see that goal against Watford, and you get frustrated because it's like, you could have done that a bit earlier. It was a fantastic strike, wasn't it? And he scored a few goals in the Championship as well. We scored some really good goals at that as well. You remember Swansea, his first goal against Brentford. So he's got it in the bag. He can shoot. I don't know if it's a lack of confidence or if it's just a sort of desire to get an assist, but there are times where you just want him to focus on shooting a little bit more. And I think that's just how you improve him as a player. Now, for me, that's not me saying he's not, like, that part of his game is not good. It's just saying if you want to sort of go to that next level, that that you're on the cusp of. I think learn to shoot, or maybe not even learn to shoot, just shoot. It's just as simple as that, just shoot. And for me, that's a con. And when a Premier League team is going to be looking at Emi Buendia, I think they're going to sort of see the assists and think, brilliant. But is he worth the money if he's not scoring as many goals in the division? And for me, that's probably one of the bigger cons. But again, I think the biggest one for me is the attitude, and the word attitude gets thrown around a lot. Nothing against the guy, of course, but sometimes you have to question it. I think Daniel Farke has quite openly questioned it as well. You look at when he got dropped earlier in the season, in the 1920 season after Watford. And to be fair, that's another con from Buendia. I think he sometimes takes a little bit too much on, and we really saw that. We saw it against Aston Villa. We saw it against Watford. And then he was dropped. He came back and looked a different player, didn't he? Which was absolutely brilliant. But they're my pros and cons. I definitely think the pros outweigh the cons, but that's just because I'm a Norwich City fan, and he's one of the best players I've seen play for Norwich in recent history at the very least. In terms of a value that I'm going to give him, I'm going to say an initial 25 to 30 million pounds. I really wouldn't be surprised to see him go for 25 and then sort of have a string of add-ons that lead up to 30, 35 million perhaps. But I can't really see Premier League teams wanting to take the gamble. One, because of the goals, two, because of the attitude, and also because Norwich's asking price is probably going to be quite colossal in the fact that he signed a 5-year deal last summer. And his ask is, I don't know if there's a release clause, there probably isn't, we would have heard about it by now, but because there's so long left on his contract, Norwich City are going to know that they are well within their right, and they haven't got to sell either, but they're going to know that they're well within their right to sort of demand top money for a top player. And an interesting tweet from Nick Mashiter said that Norwich are confident of keeping sort of the rest of their assets, which is exciting to me and pleases me quite a lot, because at the end of last season we wanted them to all stay, didn't we? Despite sort of making a video on Todd Cantwell of why he should perhaps move on. Make sure you go and check that video out as well. That's again another interesting discussion. But I think the last thing I want to say is why I think Buendia should stay, and that's just because he's 23 years old. Everyone says a footballer's career is short, but he's 23, and I think another season in the Championship wouldn't hurt him. And now that's something we've been saying quite a lot about these assets. But the way I see it, I say help Norwich City get back up into the Premier League, play with us in the Premier League unless a stupid offer comes in again, and just sort of see where you are from there. Because I think if Norwich were to bounce back up, we'd be better equipped than ever, especially within my lifetime, to be ready to stay in the Premier League. But yeah, that's such an easy thing for me to say, isn't it? And obviously Buendia's not watching this video or listening, of course, but that is just sort of my message and my feeling towards the whole thing. You're young, stay, why not? Sort of assess the situation when we're back in the Premier League. Fingers crossed, of course. Help us actually get back there. But for me, that's just about everything for this video. I'm very keen to know your thoughts in the comments down below. As ever, I think my main question is, how much do you think Emi Buendia is worth? I think another question to chuck in there is, what did you make of the interview? Obviously, it's a written one. And also, sort of, do you think he'll stay? I'm leaning towards him staying now. I was dead set on him leaving, but I'm sort of more leaning towards it now. You sort of realise that Norwich City are actually in quite a comfortable position when it comes to sort of maintaining their assets. But yeah, very keen to know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you could like the video, I'd be very, very grateful. If you could subscribe to the YouTube channel, that would be brilliant as well. Stick around for some more Norwich City content. So until next time, we'll see you again very, very soon.